Hi, friends, I want to start with a question. And I want you to really sit with it. I want you to feel it in your chest before you answer it in your head. When was the last time you made a decision and just moved without replaying it 17 times? Without imagining every possible way it could go wrong? Without consulting three friends, reading 12 articles, making a pro and con list, and then going back to bed and staring at the ceiling until 2 in the morning, convincing yourself that you're going to ruin everything. When is the last time you trusted yourself? Take a moment. Really think about it. For some of you, you're struggling to remember. For some of you, the honest answer is that you cannot remember a single moment in recent history where you made a choice, a real choice, and let it go. Where you acted and then released it. Where you lived forward instead of immediately retreating backward into your own mind to pick the whole thing apart until it was unrecognizable. And if that's you, I want you to know something right now before we go any further. You are not weak. You are not crazy. You are not fundamentally broken. You are a human being whose mind learned a habit that it believed was protecting you. And that habit has a name: overthinking. And today we are going to talk about it honestly. We're going to look at it directly. We're going to understand where it comes from, why it feels so necessary, what it's really costing you, and most importantly, how you stop it. Not perfectly, not overnight, but genuinely, consistently, bravely stop. Because here is the truth that I want to establish right from the beginning. Before we go anywhere else with this, overthinking is not intelligence. I know the world has told you it is. I know the voice in your head has told you it is. I know it feels like careful thinking, like responsible planning, like being thorough, but it is not. Overthinking is fear wearing the costume of wisdom. It is anxiety pretending to be preparation. It is your wounded past dressing itself up as practical thinking and telling you that it's helping. It is not helping. And the life you want, the peace you deserve, the version of yourself that you can sense somewhere at the edge of your awareness, that version is on the other side of learning to quiet this noise. So let's go there together. Right now, I remember sitting in my car outside a coffee shop for 45 minutes once. I had driven there specifically to go inside. I had gotten dressed. I had driven across town. I had found parking. And then I sat in the car for 45 minutes because I could not decide whether it was a good idea to go in. What was I afraid of? On the surface, nothing. There was no real danger in a coffee shop. But my brain, my magnificent, overactive, overthinking brain, had decided to run every possible scenario. What if I run into someone I know and they ask what I'm doing with my life and I don't have a good answer? What if I've been overthinking so much lately that I look strange and people can see it on my face? What if I order something and I've been avoiding dairy, but maybe just today? But no, I said I was going to be disciplined, but then again, it's just one coffee. But that's how it always starts. One small compromise, and then 45 minutes. A coffee shop. I almost drove home. And the saddest part is I smiled when I said that. Like it was a funny story, like it was quirky and relatable and endearing. But the truth is that it was a very small example of something that was costing me enormously every single day in my relationships, in my work, in my health, in my joy. Because while I was thinking about living my life was happening without me. And that, at its core, is what overthinking does. It steals your presence. It keeps you so busy living inside your head that you never quite fully arrive in your actual life. Your body is in the room, but your mind is in the past, replaying what went wrong, or in the future, catastrophizing what might go wrong. And right here, right now, in this moment where everything is actually happening, where the people you love are actually speaking, where your actual life is actually unfolding, you are somewhere else. You are lost inside your own head, and you have been there for a very, very long time. I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself, not with me, with yourself. Think about the last significant decision you made. Could have been a career decision, a relationship decision, a financial decision, a health decision, anything that mattered to you. How long did you take to make it? And then think about this. How much of that time were you actually gathering useful information? And how much of that time were you just spinning, repeating the same thoughts in slightly different configurations? Going around the same loop again and again and again, like a car stuck in a roundabout, passing the same exits over and over, never taking any of them. Most of us know the answer. We know the difference between productive thinking and the spin cycle. We know it because productive thinking eventually leads somewhere. It generates new information, new perspectives, new possibilities. It moves. The spin cycle just repeats. The same fears in different clothes, the same doubts with different justifications. The same loop tighter and tighter until you're exhausted and you still haven't decided anything. And now you also feel terrible about yourself for not being able to just make a decision like a normal person. And then sometimes, because the anxiety of not deciding becomes greater than the anxiety of deciding, you finally choose. And for about 45 seconds, you feel relief. And then the second begins. Did I make the right choice? What if the other option was better? What if I just ruined everything? What if, welcome to the loop? Population, you and about 2 billion other people who are all quietly exhausting themselves in the exact same way. So let's talk about where this comes from. Because I don't believe in trying to change something without understanding it. Understanding is compassion. And you are going to need a great deal of compassion for yourself to get through this, because breaking this habit means looking honestly at some things that your brain has been working very hard to protect you from looking at. Overthinking, in almost every case I have ever encountered, and I have worked with hundreds of people and listened to thousands more. In almost every case, overthinking begins with one thing: a moment or a series of moments where something went wrong, where you made a decision and it hurt, where you trusted someone and they let you down, where you took a risk and it didn't work out, where you opened yourself up and you got wounded, where you tried something and you failed, where you said something and it was received badly, where you showed up fully and it wasn't enough. And in the aftermath of that pain, your brain, which loves you and wants to protect you, made a determination. A logical, protective, completely understandable determination. It said, the reason that hurt was because I didn't think enough. I didn't analyze enough. I didn't see it coming. So from now on, we are going to think harder. We are going to look further ahead. We are going to see every possible danger before it arrives. We are going to be so prepared, so thorough, so covered that nothing will ever catch us off guard again. It sounds like wisdom. It sounds like growth. It sounds like learning from experience. But here is what it actually created: a mind that cannot rest. A mind that treats every decision like a potential catastrophe. A mind that cannot distinguish between genuine danger and ordinary life. A mind that is permanently on guard against a threat that in most situations does not exist. Your overthinking brain is not your enemy. It is a security guard who got traumatized on the job and now treats every visitor to the building like a potential terrorist. It is doing its job with enormous dedication and thoroughness. The problem is that the job description it's working from was written in a moment of pain and hasn't been updated since. It is protecting you from a past that is over. And in doing so, it is keeping you from a future that could be extraordinary. Let me tell you about a young woman named Priya. Priya grew up in a household where mistakes were not tolerated gracefully. Every error, every bad grade, every social misstep, every wrong decision was treated as a reflection of her worth as a person. Her parents were not cruel people. They were people who themselves had been raised in an environment where excellence was survival, where one wrong move could cost everything, where the margin for error was zero. And they passed that orientation on to their daughter as parents do, not because they wanted to harm her, but because they were giving her the only tools they had. By the time Priya was 32, she was exceptional at her job, admired by her colleagues, successful by every external measure. And she was paralyzed. She could spend 3 hours drafting a 2-paragraph email. She would rehearse phone calls before making them, sometimes for days. She had ended 2 relationships, not because anything had gone wrong, but because she had thought so much about what could go wrong that she convinced herself it already had. She had turned down a promotion that she was more than qualified for because she spent so long imagining herself failing at it that the imagined failure felt more real than her actual capabilities. She came to me not quite understanding what the problem was. She described herself as a perfectionist. She called it attention to detail. She said she was just thorough. And I understood that framing because I had used it myself for years. Perfectionism sounds like a virtue. Thoroughness sounds like a virtue. Thoroughness sounds like a virtue. and they can. But when they are really overthinking in disguise, when they are really fear dressed up in respectable clothing, they are not virtues, they are prisons. The cell is comfortable, the cell is good lighting and Wi-Fi and everything you need to survive, but you cannot go anywhere from inside a cell. And Priya had been in that cell for a very long time, calling it discipline, calling it intelligence, calling it doing things right, not realizing that she had been a prisoner for years. What began to unlock the door for Priya was something that might surprise you. It was not a meditation practice. It was not a productivity technique. It was not a 10-step system for better decision making. Though we did work on all of those things eventually, what began to unlock the door was grief. Priya needed to grieve the version of herself, the child version of herself, who had learned that the only safe way to exist in her world was to think harder and try to control every possible outcome. She needed to have compassion for that little girl who had internalized a set of rules that were designed to help her survive a specific environment. She needed to recognize that those rules didn't apply anymore, that the environment had changed, that she was an adult now with agency and resources and options that the child did not have, and that she was safe to think like a free person instead of a person who is always one mistake away from catastrophe. She cried through most of that session. And at the end, she said something I often think about. She said, "I didn't know I was still living by rules I learned when I was 8. Most of us are. The specific rules are different for each of us, but we are all in some way still living by a set of internal directives that were formed in early experiences of pain or danger or uncertainty. And until we look at those directives clearly, until we understand where they came from and whether they still serve us, they will keep running the show quietly, invisibly, convincingly. So before we talk about how to stop overthinking, I need you to do something. I need you to find a little compassion for the part of you that overthinks. Not tolerance, not indulgence, but genuine compassion. Because that part of you was not born anxious. It was not born doubtful. It was not born afraid of its own decisions. It learned to be, and learning is not weakness. It is survival. And the fact that you survived whatever taught you this is a testament to your resilience. You survived. And now together, we are going to learn something new. Now let me tell you what overthinking is doing to you. Not in the obvious ways, in the ways that are harder to see. The obvious cost is time. The hours you spend in the spin cycle, the delayed decisions, the missed opportunities, the wasted evenings lying awake when you could be sleeping, resting, recovering. That's real and it's significant. But it's not the deepest cost. The deepest cost is identity. Here is what I mean by that. Every time you face a decision and your mind drowns you in doubt, what story does that tell you about yourself? Every time you replay a conversation, picking it apart for evidence that you said something wrong, what does that whisper to you about your own adequacy? Every time you imagine the future and your imagination populates it primarily with ways things could go wrong, what belief is that reinforcing? Overthinking, left unchecked, over time builds a very specific self-image. It builds the image of a person who cannot be trusted with their own life. It builds the belief deep and quiet and rarely examined that your instincts are unreliable, that your judgment is flawed, that without extensive analysis and outside validation and meticulous planning, you will make mistakes that cannot be recovered from. It erodes self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of absolutely everything. It is the foundation of confidence. It is the foundation of healthy relationships. It is the foundation of the ability to take risks, to create, to grow, to love with your whole heart, to show up fully for your own life. When self-trust is eroded, everything built on that foundation becomes shaky. And then here is the terrible irony. The more you overthink, the less you trust yourself. The less you trust yourself, the more you feel you need to think. The more you think, the more confused you become, because overthinking does not generate clarity. Despite what it promises, it generates the opposite. It generates confusion and anxiety and an ever-expanding field of doubt. And the more confused and anxious you become, the less capable you feel of making decisions on your own. And so the overthinking increases. It is a self-reinforcing loop. It is a spiral that only goes one direction. Down, you cannot think your way out of it. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive thing I'm going to tell you today. And it is the thing I most need you to understand. You cannot think your way out of overthinking. You cannot analyze yourself out of overanalysis. You cannot make a careful plan to stop being so careful. Because overthinking is not primarily a thinking problem, it is a feeling problem. Stay with me here because this is important. When your brain enters the overthinking loop, it is responding to an emotional signal. An emotion that says, something is wrong, this is dangerous. You need to figure this out before you can be safe. And the mind, wanting to honor that signal, wanting to help, starts thinking, analyzing, planning, predicting, looking for the solution that will make the danger go away. But the emotion isn't actually looking for a solution. The emotion is looking for reassurance. It is looking to be heard. It is looking for someone, even if that someone is you, to acknowledge it and to say, I see you. I understand why you're scared. And it's okay. We're going to be okay. But most of us never learned to do that. Most of us were taught directly or indirectly that emotions are something to be managed, solved, overcome, or suppressed. Not felt, not honored, not given space. And so, instead of giving the emotion what it actually needs, we give it more thinking. And the emotion, not satisfied, not heard, not reassured, just gets louder. And we think harder. And the emotion gets louder still. And we think until we're exhausted. And the emotion is still there, unheard, underneath all the thinking, still quietly asking for something we keep refusing to give it. The way out of overthinking begins not in the mind, but in the body, in the breath, in the willingness to feel what you're actually feeling instead of thinking about what you're feeling. Let me give you a concrete example because I know this can sound abstract. You have an important conversation coming up. Maybe you need to have a difficult conversation with someone you love. Or you're going to give a presentation at work. Or you're about to have a first date with someone you actually care about impressing. And your mind starts spinning. What should I say? What should I say? What if they react badly? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I make it worse? What if it goes well initially, but then later they think about it and decide they're upset? What if this is the conversation that changes everything? What if I'm not ready? What if I need more time to prepare? What if I've already messed this up somehow? Round and round, faster and faster, louder and louder. Now here is the conventional advice. Make notes, prepare talking points, anticipate their objections, run through it in your head, plan, prepare, think it through. And some amount of that is genuinely useful. I'm not saying preparation has no value. But there is a line, and most overthinkers cross that line long before they started reading the preparation guides. Here is what I want you to try instead. When the spinning starts, stop. Put down the to-do list. Put down the mental rehearsal. And for one moment, go to what you actually feel in your body. Not what you think about it. What do you feel? Where is the tension? Where is the tightness? Is your chest constricted? Are your shoulders up around your ears? Is there a knot in your stomach? Go to that. Put your hand on it if you need to, and don't try to fix it. Don't try to analyze it away. Just acknowledge it. Say to it internally, I feel you. I know you're scared. I know this matters to you, and I'm here. I'm with you. We're going to be okay. It sounds too simple. I know it sounds too simple, but what you are doing in that moment is giving the anxious, frightened part of your nervous system what it actually needs. Not more information, not more analysis, presence, warmth, safety. And when the nervous system gets what it actually needs, the alarm begins to quiet. Not immediately and not always fully, but the volume comes down, the loop slows. And in that slightly quieter space, something becomes possible that was not possible before. Clarity, real clarity. Not the false clarity of exhausted decision making after 3 hours of spinning, but actual, genuine, embodied clarity. The kind that comes from a quiet mind and an honest heart. The kind that knows what it knows without needing to justify it to a committee. The kind that can say, here is what I think. Here is what I feel. Here is what I'm going to do. And I trust myself enough to go do it. That is the clarity that waits on the other side of overthinking. And it is extraordinarily beautiful when you find it. Let me tell you about Daniel. Daniel was a writer, brilliant, gifted, genuinely talented. He had been working on a novel for 11 years when I met him. Not writing it, working on it, meaning, thinking about it, planning it, outlining it, re-outlining it, starting a chapter, reading it back, deciding it wasn't good enough, deleting it, starting again. 11 years. And when I asked him how much he had actually written, how many completed pages existed, he looked at the floor and said, About 40. 40 pages in 11 years. From a genuinely talented writer who loved writing more than almost anything in the world. The overthinking had convinced him of something insidious. It had convinced him that if he could just think long enough, plan to understand the story deeply enough before he wrote it, he would eventually arrive at a version he could trust. A version that was safe to put down. For safe to put down. A version that would not be criticized, would not be rejected, would not reveal some inadequacy in him that he could not bear to see exposed. The overthinking was not trying to make him a better writer. It was trying to protect him from the vulnerability of being seen. From the terrifying act of making something and releasing it into the world where other people could evaluate it and find it wanting. He didn't have a writing problem. He had a fear of judgment problem. And the overthinking was the most sophisticated avoidance strategy his brilliant mind had ever constructed. When we worked together, the first thing I asked him to do was not to outline better or plan more effectively. The first thing I asked him to do was to write something he fully intended to throw away, something no one would ever see. Just 3 pages every morning about anything with zero intention of it being good, with full permission to be terrible. He resisted this enormously. Because even the private throwaway writing triggered the fear. What if he discovered in those pages that he wasn't as good as he thought? What if the overthinking had been protecting him from the truth of his own mediocrity? He did it anyway. And it was, by his own description, some of the worst writing of his life. And nothing terrible happened. The earth did not swallow him. The universe did not confirm his worst fears. He was simply a talented person writing badly in private and then getting on with his day. And over time, something shifted. The 3 pages became easier. The writing, free of the crushing weight of having to be perfect, started to breathe. Sentences started to arrive that surprised him. Characters started to feel real. The story, no longer trapped in the amber of perfect planning, started to move. 3 years after that conversation, Daniel published his novel. It was not perfect. He will tell you that himself. There are things he would change. There are passages he reads now and winces at, but it exists. It is in the world. It is on shelves. People are reading it. People are being moved by it. People are writing to him to tell him it changed something in them. None of that was possible as long as the overthinking was in charge. None of it. So I want to talk about action. Because I think one of the great misconceptions about overcoming overthinking is that it's primarily an internal process. That you need to think your way to the right mindset, and then the right mindset will enable the right actions. And there is truth in that. But it is only half the truth. The other half is this. Action, particularly action taken before you feel fully ready, is one of the most powerful antidotes to overthinking that exists. Not reckless action, not abandoning good judgment, but the deliberate, courageous act of doing something, anything, before the thinking loop has a chance to run its full cycle. Here is the science behind this in simple terms. When you take action, your brain gets information, real information, from the actual world. Information that is infinitely more useful and accurate than the imagined information your overthinking brain has been generating. And that real information, even if it includes setbacks and challenges and things that didn't go as planned, updates your understanding of the world and of yourself in a way that thinking about taking action can never do. In short, you learn more from doing one imperfect thing than from thinking about doing the perfect thing for a year. The confidence you're waiting for before you take action, it doesn't come first, it comes after. Confidence is a byproduct of action. It is evidence gathered over time that you can do hard things and survive, that you can make decisions imperfectly and recover, that you can be wrong and adjust, that you can try and fail and try again. You cannot build that evidence base in your head. You can only build it in the world. Every time you wait until you feel ready, you are waiting for something that can only come from doing the thing you're waiting to feel ready for. It is a paradox, and the only way through it is to go. Let me say that again, because I want it to land. The confidence you need to take action can only come from taking action. Thinking about taking action produces anxiety, not confidence. Preparing to take action has a limit of usefulness beyond which it produces more anxiety, not more confidence. The only thing that produces confidence is the repeated experience of taking imperfect action and surviving. So whatever it is that you've been overthinking, Whatever decision has been on your mental carousel for weeks or months or years, whatever conversation you've been rehearsing in your head, whatever dream you've been planning rather than pursuing, whatever step you've been standing at the edge of, I want you to think about the smallest possible version of taking that step. Not the whole thing, not the leap. The smallest possible next step that is still a step. A genuine, real step in the world, not in your head. And I want you to take it before you're ready, before you feel confident, before you have certainty, before you know exactly how it's going to turn out. Before you've thought about it enough times to feel safe. Take it before all of that, because all of that is a moving target. It will never arrive. You can always think a little more. You can always prepare a little more. The door of readiness never fully opens for the overthinking mind. You have to walk through the wall, take the step, then take the next one. Now I want to talk about something called the planning trap, because I see this so often and I think it's important to name it clearly. The planning trap is when planning, which is genuinely useful in appropriate quantities, becomes a substitute for action rather than a preparation for it. When the plan becomes the thing rather than the path to the thing. When the outline is more real than the novel. When the business plan is more developed than the business. When the relationship you've imagined having with someone is more detailed and vivid than the actual relationship you're choosing not to pursue because you're too busy thinking about what might go wrong. Planning as avoidance. It is one of the most socially acceptable forms of avoidance that exists because planning looks productive. Planning looks responsible. From the outside, the person who is endlessly planning looks like they are working hard and being careful. From the outside, they look like a serious person who takes things seriously. And inside, they know the truth. Inside, they know that the plan is a comfort blanket, that the planning is a way of feeling like they are moving without the terrifying vulnerability of actually moving. And I am not saying this to shame anyone. I am saying it because I have been that person. I have carried notebooks full of plans for things that never got started. Not a character in a thought experiment. An actual human being with their own inner world, their own struggles, their own love for this person who is so busy overthinking the relationship that they are not actually in the relationship. I have watched overthinking end relationships that were good. Good. Not because anything actually went wrong, but because the overthinker's mind generated enough imagined problems that the relationship began to strain under the weight of them. The constant need for reassurance, the hypervigilance to tiny signals, the endless processing of conversations after they'd ended, the creation of emotional distance as a preemptive defense against imagined rejection. And often, heartbreakingly, the person being overthought about doesn't even know it's happening. They think they have a good relationship. They think everything is fine. And then one day they find out that their partner has been quietly drowning for months in a sea of anxious thoughts that never made it into an actual conversation. If this is you, and I know for some of you it is, I want you to hear this with all the gentleness I have. The relationship that lives in your head is not the relationship. The conversations you have with someone in your imagination are not the conversations. And the only way to know what is actually true in a relationship is to be actually present in it. To show up in real time and communicate imperfectly and vulnerably what is real for you, not the perfectly managed version, not the version that has been rehearsed 17 times, the real version. The scared, uncertain, caring, honest version. That is the version that builds intimacy. That is the version that creates trust. That is the version that makes love real rather than theoretical. And yes, that is vulnerable. That is exposed. That is the opposite of the controlled environment your overthinking mind is desperately trying to maintain. But the controlled environment is not love. The controlled environment is a performance. And performances, no matter how well executed, eventually exhaust the performer. Real love, like real life, requires showing up without the script. It requires the willingness to be seen without the armor. It requires, at its most essential, the abandonment of overthinking in favor of genuine presence. Let me tell you about Michael. Michael was 51 years old. He had built a successful business over 20 years. He had a good life objectively, a home, a network, achievements he was genuinely proud of. And he was profoundly, achingly lonely. He had been married once in his 30s. The marriage had ended, not dramatically, not with betrayal or violence, but with distance. His wife had told him at the end that she had never felt like she really knew him, that he was always in his head, that being with him felt like being with someone who was always slightly elsewhere. He had processed that statement through the filter of his overthinking for 20 years. He had analyzed it from every angle. He had read books about it. He had, in a sense, thought about it more than he had ever allowed himself to feel it. And sitting across from me at 51, this accomplished man who had thought so carefully about everything, he said something that opened something in me. He said, I think I've spent my whole life trying to be smart enough to be safe, and I've ended up alone in a very, very reasoned life. A very well reasoned life, safe, logical, considered, and empty of the very things that make life worth reasoning about: connection, presence, love. Surprise, the wild, ungovernable, unanalyzable experience of being fully human. Michael began, late but not too late, the work of learning to show up differently, and it was hard. 51 years of habits do not change easily or quickly, but he began. And he told me about a year into the work that he had started a friendship with a neighbor, a real friendship, not a carefully managed professional relationship or a strategic networking connection. A genuine, vulnerable, laughing, sometimes awkward, real human friendship. And it had come about not because he had planned it, not because he had analyzed the right approach, but because one evening he had been standing by his car and his neighbor had walked by, and he had, without thinking, without planning, without overthinking, said, Hey, do you want to grab a beer? 3 words: spontaneous, unanalyzed, imperfect, real. And it changed his life more than 20 years of careful thinking ever had. I want to spend a moment talking about what the world loses when you overthink, because I don't think we talk about this enough. We talk about what overthinking costs you personally. But I want to zoom out for a moment. You have something specific to offer the world. I believe that. Not in a generic, everyone is special sort of way. I mean that you have specific experiences, specific perspectives, specific gifts, specific insights that no other person currently alive has in exactly the same configuration. The combination of everything you've lived through, everything you've learned, everything you've suffered, everything you've discovered, everything you love, everything you fear, that combination is entirely, completely unrepeatable. And when you overthink, that combination stays locked inside the loop. The book you haven't written, the idea you haven't shared, the business you haven't started, the conversation you haven't had, the kindness you wanted to offer, and then talked yourself out of. The truth you've been sitting on because you couldn't find the perfect way to say it. The love you've been holding back because you couldn't be sure it'd be returned. All of that, locked in the loop, unavailable to the world, unavailable to the people whose lives it might have changed. And I know that might sound dramatic. I know you might be thinking, my ideas aren't that important. What I have to offer isn't that significant. And I want to challenge that thought right now. Because that thought, that diminishment of your own significance, is itself a product of overthinking. It is the loop telling you that you need to be sure of your importance before you are permitted to show up. It is fear disguised as modesty. Every person who has ever created something meaningful, every artist, every entrepreneur, every teacher, every parent, every scientist, every friend who showed up at the right moment with the right words, every one of them could have let the overthinking win. Every one of them had a version of the loop that whispered, Who are you to do this? What if it isn't good enough? What if people judge you? What if you're wrong? What if it fails? Every single one. The difference between the people who created something and the people who thought about creating something is not talent. It is not intelligence. It is not favorable circumstances. It is the decision made over and over again to act despite the uncertainty, to show up despite the doubt, to trust themselves despite the fear. That decision is available to you right now, not tomorrow, not after you feel full. More ready now. Let me talk about perfectionism one more time, because I want to make sure I've been fully honest about it, because I know that many of you in this room are people who care deeply about quality, who hold high standards, who want to do things well. And I'm not here to tell you those qualities are wrong. They are beautiful qualities. They are gifts. But perfectionism, true perfectionism, is not about quality. It is about safety. It is the belief that if you can make this thing perfect, this presentation, this email, this relationship, this plan, if you can make it bulletproof, you can prevent criticism. You can prevent rejection. You can prevent judgment. You can prevent judgment. You can prevent the specific pain that some part of you is still trying to avoid. And here is what perfectionism doesn't tell you. Bulletproof is not a real category. There is no version of anything you create or do or say that is immune from criticism. There is no decision so perfect that it cannot be questioned. There is no expression of yourself so polished that everyone will receive it well. The moment you release anything into the world, you lose control of how it lands. That is simply unavoidably true. And when you accept that truth, really accept it, not just intellectually but in your bones, something extraordinary becomes possible. If nothing can be bulletproof, if no amount of thinking and polishing and preparing will ever completely protect you from judgment, then the only rational thing to do is to release the effort of making it bulletproof. To put your energy not into the endless pursuit of the perfect version, but into the honest, genuine, imperfect, real version, the version that is actually yours. The imperfect, real version will always be more moving, more useful, more connecting, more valuable than the perfect, managed, protected version. Because people don't connect with perfection. People connect with truth. People connect with the crack in the voice. People connect with the sentence that doesn't quite work, but was clearly written from the heart. People connect with the attempt. With the vulnerability of the attempt, give them the attempt, give them the real version, give them you. I'm coming toward the end now, and I want to say something that I have been building toward through everything we've talked about today. Something that I want to leave with you in a way that you will carry it, not just for a day or a week, but for the rest of your life. Overthinking at its heart is a failure of self-trust. That is what it is. That is the simple, honest truth at the center of everything we've discussed today. It is the result of a mind that was taught, in one way or another, that its own judgment cannot be trusted, that its own instincts are unreliable, that it needs more information, more validation, more certainty, more external verification before it can be trusted to make decisions and move forward. And the way you heal a failure of self-trust is the same way you heal any broken trust. You show up. You follow through. You make commitments and you honor them. You make decisions and you stand behind them, even when you're wrong. You act with imperfect information and you update when you learn more. You fall down and you get up. You say the wrong thing and you repair the relationship. You try the thing you were afraid to try and you survive the outcome, whatever it is. One by one, moment by moment, decision by decision, you build the evidence base that tells you, I can be trusted. My judgment is not perfect, but it is mine, and it is good enough, and it gets better every time I use it. You build the only confidence that will ever last. Not the borrowed confidence of a good day or a favorable circumstance. Not the performance of confidence. The real thing. The bone-deep knowing that you are capable of navigating your own life, that you have what it takes, not because you're perfect, not because you're fearless, not because you never doubt, but because you've proven it to yourself again and again by going, let me tell you where I am now. Not to impress you, but to show you where this work leads, so you have a direction to move in. I still have the voice, the overthinking voice. It is still there, it still shows up when something important is at stake. It still generates the questions, the doubts, the imagined scenarios. I am not going to pretend that I arrived at some enlightened place where the mind is perfectly quiet and every decision is effortless. But the relationship I have with the voice has changed completely. I used to be afraid of it. I used to let it run everything. I used to believe that because it sounded logical and careful and thorough, it must be right. Now I hear it differently. Now when the loop starts, I can recognize it. I can say, there's the fear. There's the old pattern. Thank you for trying to protect me. I'm okay. I've got this. And then I take the step anyway. Not perfectly. Not without fear, with fear. And the step. Because here is what I know in the deepest part of me, after everything I have walked through and tried and failed at and tried again. A life fully lived, a life of genuine connection and creativity and love and contribution. That life is not available inside the thinking loop. That life is not achievable through enough analysis or enough planning or enough preparation. That life lives on the other side of the thought. It lives in the action, the conversation, the attempt, the step. And every time you take that step, every single time you choose the action over the analysis, the conversation over the silence, the attempt over the perfect plan, You are not just doing a thing. You are becoming someone. You are becoming a person who trusts themselves, a person who shows up, a person who is present in their actual life, a person who stops waiting for certainty and starts creating reality. That is who you have always had the potential to be. Not some future, improved, more prepared version of you. This version. Now, with everything you carry and everything you've been through and everything you're still figuring out. Right now, you have what it takes to start. Not tomorrow, not after more thinking. Right now. I want to close with this. Think about your life 10 years from now. Think about the version of you that is living in that time. And I want you to imagine two versions. In one version, you kept the loop, you kept the spinning, you kept the planning and the preparing and the second guessing and the not quite being ready and the almost and the soon and the when things are more certain. In that version, things are safe, controlled, managed. And there is a version of you standing in that imagined future who cannot quite remember a dream they once had, who is responsible and careful and fine, who is living a life that is okay. In the other version, you made the different choice. Not all at once, not perfectly, but consistently, daily. You chose the imperfect action over the perfect plan. You chose the vulnerable conversation over the silent spiral. You chose presence over protection. You chose yourself. And in that version, 10 years from now, there is a person who has lived, who has failed and recovered, who has loved and been hurt and loved again, who has created things they are proud of, who has relationships that are real and deep because they dared to be real and deep themselves, who knows in a way they cannot quite articulate but can feel in their whole body that they are okay, that they were always going to be okay, that the thing they were so afraid of, the uncertain, uncontrolled, unplanned adventure of trusting themselves, was the greatest decision they ever made. That second version of you is possible. Not easy, not certain, but possible. And it begins with one simple, radical, deeply courageous act. Stop thinking about beginning. Begin. Thank you.